Giving you a quick walkthrough on the one of my firewood racks. If you look at the plan I have on Instructables, this is one that was built just like the way it shows, and you know, basically the one rack going this way, another one going this way, screwed to a third one on the ground. I like to find some sort of timbers. As you can see here, I used landscaping timbers, and I came up short, so I just made a little bridge between the two of them. And I know I showed the idea of a IBC tank for the roof, but in this case, this is a aluminum floorboard out of a freighter aircraft that I worked on, and we ended up parting out the airplane, and they didn't care to have this, so I got to keep it. Over here I have some of my steel roofing that I cut into sections long enough to go across, because otherwise the ribs would be going the other way. So this way it drains off to the outside of the stack, which is what I'm looking for. And then I just use these screws with the hex heads and the little rubber gasket here to seal. Not that I'm really worried. Any water that's going to get through those drip holes is pretty small. Sorry about the mess. I got to clean up this area before I can refill it. But here's one of the ones with the actual tote tank roof in place. And yeah, I store my loose stuff as well. And there's some more over there with the tote tank roof in. A couple of my kayaks sitting on top. I'm all full and ready to go. And another thing I don't show in the Instructable, I'm going to add to this video. These are those plastic shelves you can get at, you know, Walmart, any store in particular. And they actually are something that I'm adding. I have a pretty good stack of plastic pallets I got for free, but if you don't have those, always be watching where people are throwing stuff away, because those plastic shelves work just as well. And really I could have gone with one layer, except I was trying to level up the bottom of that stack because of the hill in my yard. But I think one layer would be plenty, and then put your wood racks on top of it, keep the bugs out of them. And that'll save me from having to find bricks and rocks, and sometimes the pallets shift off of those bricks and rocks. But this right here, you know, having to buy big paving stones like those, this right here gives me a nice solid plastic base. So I'll show you some of the other stuff I have in my stacks here. This is one of those plastic pallets like you'll find like around the post office. The trick with them, you know, they just have the divots molded into the bottom. And the trick with them is drill a hole in the side of the divot, because it's hollow on top. That way rainwater won't get in there, and then if you live where I do, where it freezes, it'll expand and crack it. You drill a hole in the side, the water will run out, you won't have that problem. Another thing I've done here, these are the bottoms from the TKS tote tanks. There's a metal base right there that I ended up using on that one, and this one I made the whole thing into, like, basically I just took the tank off the top and the whole bottom, that's like a pallet so a forklift can pick it up. Just used it right here to hold. This is the second time it's been reloaded with wood, and it's standing up solid. Actually, I'm pretty impressed with how strong they are. Getting ready to refill. Here's another rack. I actually cleaned this one out this past winter, but you can see the different colors in the metal. I just did that kind of because I had two different colors. But that right there gives you an idea of the lengths I cut them to make a roof. And I'm going to be rebuilding this with, I got all those plastic pallets, so I'm going to be laying them in for bases here and get rid of these wooden ones to use as the vertical members. And then these old ones that are all rotten and busted up, cut them up and they make good kindling. So you get the good out of it one way or the other. Another thing I've used for roofing, I've talked about it before, but this is an above ground pool wall, and if you're looking at the width, notice the overhang on both sides. That right there works out nicely for covering a firewood rack, and the way I got it because it was a good-sized pool, probably about 4 feet deep. The guy folded it up, put it in his car. Well, those folds stay, but they actually help give it a little bit of rigidity, so I haven't flattened them out. I've just screwed it down to, I got a central pole running underneath all of it here, and I've just screwed it down to that, put some cross boards every so often to help support it, keep it from tipping, and it actually is incredibly good roofing if you can find it. I've got one more folded up piece long enough for another rack. And then this right here, where I keep my splitter. You got it in its own kind of little shed. Keeps the rain and snow off of it, especially off the motor, and it's mostly what I care about. And this is just a topper, hard topper, fiberglass. Somebody had it by the side of the road for free, but I just put a couple timbers going across here so it's centered from the center post of that one to the center post of that one. Covers right over here, and my son has been able to pull wood out of this rack even though the splitter was here. In fact, I pushed it back a little bit. Pull it back up so it's just underneath there a little better, but keeps it out of the elements. You know, it's not, I don't have to keep a cover over it, but just so that it's there. And another roofing idea. This was my old oil tank. Came home from vacation a couple years ago, and my basement smelled like oil, home heating oil, or kerosene actually, that's what I burn. And had to replace the tank, and I thought, well, it'd be a shame to throw this thing away. It's still waterproof. So basically cut it vertically right down the middle. You can see there's all the filler ports and whatever from the top of it. Split it in half. It is, as you can see, perfect width, if not a little more. So that was pretty simple. I screwed a 2x4 up underneath here and built these little legs to hold it up, support it on the center beam, and put some screws through it. And then for the little gap here in the middle, because of the length, this is 3 pallets long. Just a little bit of steel roofing screwed down. Makes nice filler for the gap. And nice thing is, now I have not had issues with, you know, bugs or hornets or anything living under here, but if they did, it's the summertime. I don't need my wood racks at that point, and I can actually stuff wood up underneath and actually squeeze a little bit more up underneath there. Give me a little bit more wood, and you know, because you put wood in the rack and then it seasons. Like this rack right here. When I stuffed this rack, I stuffed it right up to the roof. This is another one with the steel roofing, or the steel pool wall. And I got another section of it. That's the way I got it. I'll fold it up. The guy that gave it to me. I had it stuffed to the top, and you can actually tell the wood has seasoned because it shrinks. And as it shrinks, you get a gap here, and it's just one of those other things you can watch to see how much your wood has seasoned. But so there's some ideas for the simple pallet firewood rack. This is an extra tall pallet right here. I get some of that vinyl. This is a hanger door. Still haven't figured out what to do with it yet. I thought about covering a firewood rack, but I like solid roofs better because of snow and ice and boats. It's a free canoe I picked up. I got a patch of crack in it. But right here, this is an extra tall pallet. That is taller than the usual length of a pallet. And by finding 2 like that, I was able to make an extra tall rack, which doesn't hurt anything. I actually have a little bit more in this rack than I do in this one, just because of the height, even with those oil drum roof sections that I have on it. So there, variety of different ideas. I got some here. These are plastic barrels that I cut apart and stretched over the top of the wood rack, and they are just long enough, but man, did they fight when you're trying to get them on. You have to basically get up and climb on top of them and put your knee on it to hold it. This here is a piece of old Homosote I threw on. I have better roofing material, I just haven't got around to putting it on this section that's not doing so hot. But when I rebuild this rack with a plastic bottom or a plastic shelving underneath it, that'll get taken care of as well. But you know, the nice thing is with these racks, most of the time I can just go ahead and start throwing wood back in them as soon as I start splitting it again in the spring. So it works out pretty nice like that. So just showing here the replacing the wood that was on the base of these, the plastic pallets. So the first thing, take the wood pallet up, and we'll reuse this later. I have to make sure to get the bricks. I have better uses for them. Let's add 2 layers here. Wow. In their place, laying down some of these plastic pallets that I was lucky enough to find on Craigslist. Had to beat a few other people out because the person who offered them to me just kept offering them to other people, even though I said I was on my way. So I shared a few. As it was, I had as many as I could probably carry on my truck, even with giving away a number of them. As you can see, this is a little wider, probably a little longer, but I don't see that as a problem. I'm not really sure. It's kind of an experiment as well. So I'm going to find out how those hollow square parts, if they sink into the ground, and how far they sink with a stack of wood on top of them. But I'm really not worried. Once they hit the deck, they'll stop. And if that doesn't turn out to be enough to keep the wood dry, I'll lay a layer of wood pallets on top of them again. And those will be the barrier between that and the ground. The next part is how do we build with the wood on top, like that part. Put the end piece with the first center piece up. This pallet is seriously just there to stabilize everything as I get the first connection done here, which will be screws going through this piece to lock into this piece, which holds it all together. And it's just basically you want to line it up so whatever screw you put through goes into the center member of the end pallet there. And now those are locked together to support on the end the way I want it to. Just drive a couple more screws to make sure that it's well secured. Since the stack of wood will be here pushing against that end. So these screws right here are the ones that hold the end from being able to be pushed off or blown out. Okay, another one, probably one more just for good measure. There isn't a whole lot of force pushing against these. but what there is, those screws will take up. Next thing I had to think about is how do I keep these tied to the bottom, since on the old system we would have had these 2x4s stuck to the end and tied to the end of this. Can't do that with this. So instead, took the same 2x4s I had before and just simply dropped them down inside like that. Run a couple screws to hold them in place right through here like this. So with those secured, I got another block over here. And then pull this assembly right up to the end like that where I want it. And I know the plastic is thick enough, but really the only force it's going to have is shear, not tension. And if you notice, I'm using, these are the ones with the Torx heads. I think they're called Spax or something like that. That's the brand name, but they have a Torx head. And the thing, I've reused all of these, almost all of these came out of the old rack. They're going into the new rack, and I can take it apart again and rework it the next time I have an idea as well, because unlike a Phillips that tends to strip out, as long as these don't get too rusty, you'll never have a problem with them. So now those are zapped down hard and tight. So this end, not going anywhere. Have to say that, don't you? Especially after you tie something down, or else it might fall off. So then the next part is setting up the rest of the centerpieces. And then for setting the center members, the center pallets that stand up, hold up the ends, for setting the bottom of them, keep them from pushing back and forth right here, do the same thing again. Just a piece of 2x4 scrap wood. It can be one of these that you cut apart. Same thing. Drop it down in there. If it won't go nice and easy, use a persuader and tap it in place with a couple screws. And these won't need even as many screws, but I'll put at least one, I'll probably do two. Since it doesn't hurt anything, put another one in. And now this pallet is anchored firmly to a plastic pallet on the bottom. And for tying the rack together, I like to run a beam or a 2x4 or something along the top. Helps you have something to anchor your roofing into better, but it ties the the end from that pallet all the way to the one at the other end together. So in this case I got some landscaping timbers. So I'm going to have to take care of that first. That block is just set a little bit too high. So as I was saying, so now I've got the landscaping timber running down the top. Obviously going to have to splice it in the middle to make the connection to that end because it's not a really long one. I've had some luck taking down people's old fences, cedar fences in particular, getting 12-foot or maybe even longer 4x4s. That's what I've used in some of these other racks, but at this point I don't think I have anymore. So these, I think they're 8-foot landscaping timbers tied together in the middle do the same job, and it's just going to be the same thing of tying the pallet into a block that fits into up here between those two boards, and then screwing that into this at this end here. Now I've also done before where just driving at an angle up into here. Whatever you want to do, you can do it different ways, but you just want to tie it together because the wood stack is going to kind of push and pull, and you just want to make sure that it's all tied together the way you want it to. So I've got the block set in here. Couple screws to hold it in different directions. So that I know that is nice and secure. It's more secure than just driving it through into this beam. That tends to be a little wiggly. And then from the bottom, and this isn't going anywhere, which is the way we want it. A couple old pieces of 2x4 and a bunch of brick-sized chunks to give me more pieces for tying into the pallet and tying into the beam. Setting another block down in. So you can set this pallet right. It's a good anchor. I'm just trying to align it on this base pallet so I know that it's about in the middle. Gaps like this are actually not a problem. The wood, though, as you're stacking it, will kind of tend to lock in to these different spots here, and that helps hold your stack in place, and it actually helps keep it from tipping, believe it or not. So that's tied down. Give it another screw just because. Drop the block in the other end. Of course, won't drop, so I'm going to have to resort to the persuader again. So it's down in there. Just a different perspective on how I'm aligning these. I'm kind of using these circles in the plastic. You can use different lines if it's the other type of plastic that has like the grid to it. This way, I know this is securely tied together, and I'm getting it about as close to the middle as I can without getting out a measuring tape or anything crazy like that, which I'm talking firewood here. This is not like building a house or a fancy type of woodshed where you want it to look really pretty. This is just a simple pallet based firewood rack made with as much free stuff as possible. So as you can see, I've got the typical straight piece of wood from Home Depot. No twists, no bows, no curves to it. Lays perfectly straight all on its own. This thing is almost twisted like a drill bit or a candy cane. Screws fix that. If you ever built a house with the quality timber from most of your big box home stores, you know you're going to need some tools to help you straighten things. That's another reason to do these blocks, because they give you a lot better ability to control what forces you have on your materials. To give the board a little bit of a correction on how bad it is. Driving up through, and you see the tip of it right here, so I'm just going to take that, I'm going to press it right down on it. And if you notice, that block came up and met it. This could be a little bit more centered than it is. Let's try that again. Now luckily, I got these landscaping timbers at the end of the season. They were just trying to clear out the pallet so they could get the rock salt in and whatever else for winter. So I don't care how twisted they are. They were probably only $2 a piece or something because they were trying to get rid of them. But now we've got it more or less straight the way we want. I'll go back here and I'll put another block under this end just to keep the pallet straight here, but with each corner tied down, tied to the center beam, tied to the base pallet. It's not going anywhere, and it'll be nice and solid for years to come, unless a tree falls on this. Or I even think a tree falling on this might not really bust it, especially if it was full of firewood. It'd be like falling on a solid block of concrete. It's not going anywhere. But it's just a basic idea of how I put these together. I'm showing you this one because it's got a little bit of a gap here, and I don't think I'm going to get that to flex down enough with the screws, and you really don't want it to anyways. So I'll show you an easy way to take care of that, still have a solid connection. Starting with your block here. So you know it's driven in good. And another one right here. Ah, that was good. So that's solidly in there. And then this upper end now that is solidly connected. This isn't going anywhere right there. And this makes up for the gap that would be right here, because you can't get this up flush all the way if you're going to have good connections. And I'll drive one in from the other side too afterwards. So the last thing we have to do here is tie these two halves together. So another chunk of wood. I mean, you can see how straight and perfect and dead on those boards are for accuracy, straight grain and everything. Nothing but the best. So I'm going to want a longer screw. I've got some that are, well, this is actually the container right here. You can see the Spax T25 2.5, and then I have some that are 3-inch. And for a section like this, so that's a thicker board going into a thick piece here with a gap, I'll try and use a longer one. That's a nice straight lumber there. And now this whole thing is tied together pretty securely, and the only thing left is put the roof on. So as I showed in the Instructable, I had some with a plastic roof, but I don't work there anymore, so I can't get any more of the totes that I used to get for the plastic tanks inside of them that I could cut up. So I use other stuff as well. This is one of them. This is actually from the same place. This was a floorboard protector from an aircraft that we bought in our last place, and ended up parting it out because it was in really tough shape. We just use palletized cargo and roll it around with a Johnson bar. Looks like a little two-wheel dolly, but it only just has a little metal hook on it. And you lift up one end of the pallet, stick rollers under it. You go around to the other end, you lift the other end up, and you push it in place. And you strap it down. And this is what they used on top of the floor, so that all that weight concentrated didn't punch through or damage anything. And since we were parting the airplane out, they didn't care what happened to this. So it is now a firewood for me. The whole reason I do a roof on my firewood is because leaves and ice and snow. If you let leaves sit into a stack of firewood, you'll end up with rotten spots in your firewood stack, because leaves hold water, and anything that holds water against the wood will rot it. So leaves are the biggest enemy. If you live somewhere where there's no leaves, you can probably get away without top covering it. And this is just, these are actually chunks of old ladder I cut up, but making some cross supports for this roof to keep it steady, like when it's empty, like right now, so when the wind blows it doesn't tear the roof off. And also, as you see, I store kayaks on here, and if you look around on my channel or my Facebook page, you'll find pictures of these stacks some years when it actually snows, with quite a bit of snow on the roof. So this just keeps everything secure so it doesn't collapse on me or blow over, or worst case, drop my kayaks on the ground. I care a lot more about the firewood or the rack. Just simply lining these up about where there's holes from where I drilled into them before. But even a few small holes doesn't really matter. They a little bit of water getting in, I don't care about. There'll be a couple pieces here and there that aren't quite as dry as the rest, but I burn a lot, so it doesn't really matter. The big thing I care about is ice and snow in a stack can push it over. If it builds up in the middle, it can push outward. And then leaves, obviously leaves also tend to invite bugs, squirrels, things like that. And any of them getting into your stack, you'll end up with wood that's no good. A stack cover like this gives you a slight advantage, only because the wood in the middle pretty much never gets wet. So as soon as the sun comes out after a rain, or it stops raining, these start to continue to cure a little bit sooner than a stack that's uncovered and just sitting there. But I consider it worth it. Like I said, I got a lot of leaves in this area. You saw what was underneath when I started. Because this aluminum is so thick, about 1/8 of an inch, I think. I'm actually gonna use a drill bit first, punch the holes into it for the screws that are going into this center beam. And that'll just make it a lot easier. You know, the really thin gauge steel roofing, I usually get it at Home Depot or Lowe's, and every time I go in the store, I look back at the rack where they have it, and what I look for are the dented, crushed, the buckled, the split. I don't care if there's holes in them or whatever, because where I care more about leaves than anything, a little bit of roofing, even with a couple holes in it, is a whole lot better than none. And you take that, put it on your cart, take it up to the customer service desk, not the cashier, and ask them to, you can have a discount because it's damaged. And usually they'll take 10-20% off depending on what mood they're in. And that's all the steel roofing that I've got on my firewood racks. That's how I got it, was by doing that. So now I'm just tying this down to that center beam. That's the reason I do the center beam, is to give it a solid roof, keep it tied together. So this last part of the roof, after the aluminum runs out, I'm just using some old steel roofing, cut to the right length. Did it the simple way, put the blade, a regular wood blade, in my circular saw backwards, and just marked where I wanted to cut it, and cut it with the blade running backwards. It actually works pretty well. It's a good idea to keep an old blade for doing that, because it does tend to take the edge off. Underneath here I've put some cross pieces, and I've screwed down through in the middle with the spack screws all the way down into that center beam to get this all solid. And it's obviously not going to be as strong as the 1/8 inch, but that's really overkill. And then the next thing is to put these type of roofing screws for steel roofing into the roof. Yeah, they're just these little screws like that. They have the washer with the rubber grommet, and we got a hex driver with a magnetic holder, so the screw stays right in there like that, and it will actually drill right through the metal. But I have pretty much lined up my holes so that they each go into one of these, just because steel roofing does need a little bit more support than like that 1/8 inch steel or aluminum. I really haven't given it too much to support it, and I know it'll stand up tall, but this needs a little bit of a little buckle across the ridges in the middle. With these, it's just simply a matter of, well, in this case, I've already got the holes made, so just not setting them too deep, mostly because you'll crush the rubber gasket almost to the point there isn't anything left of it, like that. And this drill actually has a nice setting I can hit, where it will run slow, and then once it hits resistance at the end, then it actually starts to ramp the torque up on you, which is the nice way to do this steel roofing with these kind of screws. Because you know the first couple of clicks is all you need, and you can shut it off then. Just like that. That one I actually drilled through the metal because the hole was missing the wood. These screws will actually punch through just fine. So that's how I do the plastic bases, the plastic pallets for the same old pallet firewood rack. A little bit of firewood in there for scale. And as you can see, I have my chainsaw blade marked at 17 inches. And I just turn the blade sideways, cut the wood, turn it back straight. So I end up anywhere 16 to 18, and my stove is happy up to an 18-inch piece. So basically, it's not a ridiculous amount of overhang for 17-inch to 18-inch to 16-inch pieces of wood. And when this is all full, each pallet vertically stacked and going across every 3 pallets, or each pallet is 1/3 of a cord by calculations based on cubic feet. A cord of wood being 4 by 4 by 8 foot solid stacked block of firewood. And of course I'm not cutting it to make 2 feet going across, or 4 feet going across. So but figuring the length of my wood, height of my stacks, each pallet actually holds a little over 1/3, and that's why I go for the extra height. I like to have that. So this is 4 pallets long, so this is a cord and 1/3 plus a little more. It's always better to have more in your racks anyways. So there it is, simple pallet firewood rack, modified with a plastic base, different various materials for roofs. And the really only big expense I have is the screws and the ones that I actually put steel roofing on. I spend a little bit for that too, but otherwise it's the lowest cost you're going to do for firewood storage.